Creed 3 is just a few weeks away, so I'm starting a new project here on World of Geekdom, and the project's going to be called The Rocky Road to Creed 3, where I'm going to go back and watch and re-review the original Rocky films all the way through to Creed 2. So we're going to talk about Rocky 1 through 5, Balboa, and then Creed 1 and Creed 2. I have done reviews on the Creed films here on World of Geekdom. I think I did one for Creed 2 on here. Creed 1 may be on the other channel, but I'm going to be re-reviewing them, and we're going to start today with the very first Rocky film, going all the way back, because this franchise has been around a long time. 1976 is when the first Rocky was released, directed by John G. Avildsen, and written, the story and the script is by Sylvester Stallone, who also stars as, of course, Rocky Balboa. Plus, you've got Talia Shire as Adrian, Burt Young as Paulie, Carl Weathers as the legendary world champion Apollo Creed, and Burgess Meredith, of course, from the Batman live-action television show. He played the Penguin on there, and several other TV shows, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, and he plays Mickey, the trainer. So this is the ultimate underdog story. The story of an unknown getting a shot at the world title. A guy who has no business being in the ring with a world caliber athlete like Apollo Creed. A guy who's a bum who works basically as a loan shark for a character who I wish he would be in more of these movies, but Tony Gazzo is his boss in the film, and he's fantastic. You know, the movie opens with a look at the underground, low-level boxing scene, which is Rocky versus Spider Rico, and it really is a great story, because when you look at that opening scene and you fast forward to the events of like Rocky 3, Rocky 5, or even Balboa, or even Creed 2, it's amazing as to how this guy goes from fighting for pennies on the dollar to being wealthy to obviously eventually, sort of having issues with his family and so on and so forth. But it all began here. And when you look at Rocky, what I think makes Rocky a great movie is not just the story, but the incredible performance by Sylvester Stallone. I feel like Rocky in the first two films is a bit different than Rocky later on. He's not very educated. He's kind of, I don't want to say punchy, but a little slow or whatnot. Obviously, people can get smarter as they go along, but the story really is not just about Rocky's sort of rise into getting this title shot that he doesn't even, many folks would in real life feel he doesn't deserve it because he's kind of a bum, but that's the story of the movie, and he does well. We'll get to that in a minute. But really, Rocky underneath the surface is a love story, and I think Talia Shire plays this sort of quiet, shy, lonely girl, Adrian, who is the sister of Rocky's friend Paulie, and of course, they get together in the film, and it's interesting because there are some scenes in this movie that with Rocky and Adrian that I find to be totally adorable and really, really, really likable, especially, as their relationship progresses. Really, she becomes a very important character in Rocky 2 and 3, even more so than in Rocky 1. But there is that one scene of them alone in his apartment, which is a tiny, tiny bit creepy. I do feel like some folks maybe over-exaggerate the creepiness of that scene. The way he seduces her, kind of puts her up against the wall. We live in an age now past the Me Too movement where things like this can be considered by those on the internet to be inappropriate. I don't feel like it was. I mean, even Talia Shire herself said that she thought that Stallone was brilliant, but at the same time, yeah, it is a little weird. It is a little weird, and it's played strange. It's just not something that we see nowadays anymore. My favorite character in Rocky 1 has to be Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers. Carl Weathers is amazing in everything. I was so happy to see him come back in The Mandalorian, and I love the Apollo Creed character. Well-spoken, very intelligent man, obviously a world-class fighter. They both had to get in tremendous shape for this film as well as the sequels. And my other favorite character has to be the performance by Burgess Meredith of Mickey. Burgess Meredith is the perfect person to play this character because, you see him on the Batman show. He's this squawky kind of, he's a penguin, behaving in a very, erratic sort of way. And really, Mickey is like that. Mickey's a guy who he runs a gym. He trains boxers, but none of them ever get the shot that Rocky gets. And it's interesting how Rocky and Mick are kind of at odds for most of the film. Mick thinks that Rocky is a good fighter, but he never sees his full potential. But once Rocky gets the opportunity to face off against Apollo Creed, suddenly Mickey is interested, and they end up getting together and they train. The training montage in this film, there's so many things about this movie that have been mimicked and or copied. Rocky punching the meat inside of the meat plant is like a legendary scene, with the blood on his knuckles from the meat. Rocky running with the Gonna Fly Now theme by Bill Conti. Tremendous music in this film. That's a legendary scene. Apollo coming out dressed in the USA garb for the bicentennial of Philadelphia. And really, this movie shows a lot of the city of Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia in January of 2022. I went to go see Raw 30th, and I got to see some of the slums. And, Philadelphia is a pretty interesting city. There are some, it's probably not one that I would live in, but it's definitely a lot more relaxed and a lot more laid back than like New York City, for example. It's a big city, but it's not a city where it feels like a metropolis, even though it's a big city. A lot of it does sort of feel like you're in a neighborhood. You're in El Barrio, you know what I'm saying? And that's something that I found really cool about the city and the film. This movie's being re-released on 4K very, very soon, along with the other 3 Rocky films. And I, for one, am very excited because I can't wait to see it. The movies from the 70s, if done properly on a 4K HDR, from the original film reels, like an actual good remaster, I feel like that, it's going to look amazing. Jaws looked amazing. Godfather looked amazing. Apocalypse Now looked amazing. Movies from that time period that were all shot on film look absolutely beautiful in 4K. And Stallone, I believe, is supervising this transfer, so I think it'll be fine. But really, the movie, the scene of Rocky and Adrian going to the ice rink, that was kind of a cute scene. It's kind of that awkward first date thing. I really like that they captured the awkward first date. I think people who either haven't dated or haven't dated in a while don't understand that if you're going on a first date, both you and the person you're going on a date with are nervous. That's the truth. That's the way it is. You want to set your best foot forward. You want to show the good sides of your personality. You want to sort of become likable and maybe get along with this person. And it does feel awkward. And I think that goes into Talia Shire's, I feel like underrated performance, even though in the second movie she really shines even more. In the first film, they're both sort of this awkward couple, but somehow it works. The one character that I think can be kind of annoying, but at the same time, that's his job, is Burt Young as Paulie. Man, Paulie's a dick in this movie. Taking Adrian's turkey and throwing it out the window, that was a little bit too much, that was just mean. That was just straight up mean, with or without Rocky, it's mean, and I don't like that. But either way, he does a lot of unlikable things in this film as well as Rocky 3. But, he's really unlikable in Rocky 5. But, I think he's fine in some aspects. But in this movie, he's just kind of a dick. So the final battle between Rocky and Apollo Creed, very well built up. Really a story that, again, has been done time and time again. There are so many sports films that have borrowed this formula and made it work. The underdog team going up against the experienced world caliber team. And Rocky, although he might not have the boxing skills of Apollo Creed in any way, he's got a very powerful punch, and he ends up breaking Apollo Creed's ribs before the final round of the fight. Creed is a better boxer, but Rocky really put the punishment on him. And the whole story here is that Rocky can take a licking and keep on ticking, which becomes a plot thread going through the remaining Rocky films. It's just, that's how he is. He's a brawler, and it is what it is. Just the little things here and there about the film, and sort of the where Rocky is at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie. And I do love the story of, like, Rocky goes and fights Creed, and when he finishes the fight, win, lose, or draw, it doesn't even matter because he went the distance with Creed, which no one had been able to do. Nobody's been able to last all 15 rounds to the world champion. He went there, and then all he cared about was his girl at the end. All he cared about was his girl. And really, that to me set the stage for Adrian in the next two sequels and Rocky's relationship. I feel like this movie, even though it was intended to be a one and done, I don't believe there were sequels planned at first. It does feel like they had sequels planned, just based on the fact that the film sort of ends, it's a good ending. You could put a bow on it, but it does feel like they could do more with the characters. Also, some of the things that I found interesting that maybe you didn't know, but there's a lot of characteristics in the film. There's a lot of characters that sort of borrow from real life characters. Rocky is a little bit of Rocky Marciano. Apollo Creed is kind of like Muhammad Ali. Joe Frazier is actually in the film. And we actually, if you look into the history of the movie, Stallone wrote the screenplay for this movie after watching Muhammad Ali and Chuck Wepner in Richfield, Ohio. And it's interesting because the story of that fight was that people didn't know if Chuck Wepner would be able to go the distance, and he didn't. He did not go the distance, but he lasted a lot longer than people thought. So that, to me, really inspired the film. Even though Rocky's denied it, it seems pretty obvious, right? The key to this film is three things: the performances, the script, and the cinematography, and all of them work to perfection. Even though the film takes place in the 70s, you can still watch it now and understand what's going on. Obviously, we live in a different time period of technology, but boxing is still boxing, and while the rules may not be the same, boxing is still boxing. So it is a boxing movie. It's a movie that a lot of people enjoy, even not just Americans. My father, who was, literally lived in Cuba almost his entire life, he loved this film. Lots of Hispanic people who are into boxing, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, they love the film, even though it's not really about them necessarily. Rocky is an Italian. It just reminds me of that awesome scene where Apollo's like trying to figure out what the headline, like he's a promoter also besides being a boxer. Apollo Creed versus the Italian Stallion. Sounds like a damn monster movie. That's like my favorite line of the whole movie, yo. And I love how at the end of the film, Apollo says, "Ain't gonna be no rematch. Ain't gonna be no rematch." And Rocky says, "Don't want one." With Rocky, it wasn't even about winning. It was about going the distance. In fact, the music that plays at the end is called Going the Distance. Beautiful, beautiful film. It's pretty simple to tell that the first Creed film from 2015, which I consider Rocky 7, even though some might not. It is its own thing, but it is a Rocky movie. It's in that universe. The first Creed film borrows a lot from the first Rocky, although they do things differently. It's obviously in a modern setting. You've obviously got different characters with different struggles, but this idea of, being a nobody and becoming a somebody is still prevalent, although in Creed, it became a lot more about Donnie's heritage and who he could be versus Rocky, who really had no heritage of boxing that we know of. He was just a guy trying to make it. Of course, the big reason as to why he's even doing that, which I think is a great answer, when he's asked, "Why did you choose to fight?" And he says, "Because I can't sing or dance." And that's really kind of the dream for a lot of people. If you want to be rich and famous, the only ways to do it, besides of course going into business, if you're not too intelligent, if you're a little bit uneducated like Rocky is, would be sing, dance, or become an athlete. And boxing and fighting and taking hits is what Rocky does best, so it fit him. It's a great film. It does stand on its own as being a great movie, and it launched this phenomenal franchise that has multiple multiple great films to its name. Multiple. There are more good Rocky films than there are Star Wars films. In fact, there's more great Rocky films than there are Star Wars films. So we'll be looking at these once again here on the Rocky Road to Creed 3. Take care. Have a good one. I'll see you in Rocky 2.